All right, so good evening, everyone. And thank you very much, firstly, for Jenny and for Rob Copley for asking me to speak this evening, and certainly to support you all here in the FRA. I am familiar with a few of you. I've met some of you before, as Jenny mentioned, maybe through Farmer Copley's or also through some of the work I did at Croots a year or two ago. So I hope, first of all, you're all keeping well. I know under the current circumstances, these are difficult times and certainly unprecedented times, and a lot of us are dealing with this situation quite differently. So I hope today to provide you all with some insights into how potentially you can open your cafe or your restaurant, potentially for those of you who do pick your own or are looking at events further down the line, and also how we handle furloughed staff and the considerations to bring some of those or all of those employees back into the workplace. And I appreciate that a lot of you are at different stages. You're at different stages of your preparations, of your thinking, of your confidence. So I hope sort of for the next 30 minutes, I can provide maybe some new information, or if nothing else, maybe clarification that you're doing the right things, you're saying the right things, and you're on the right path. And quite often it's that reassurance, which is as good as new information as well. So I have prepared some presentation slides. Today's session will be recorded, so you can go back and listen and look. And also I'll email the presentation to Jenny, so that if anybody does want a copy of the slides and you can't keep up writing and making notes, it will be there for you afterwards. Okay. It was quite interesting. I was on my sofa last night watching a bit of TV when my WhatsApp beeped, and Rob Copley decided to share with me one of these sort of American business gurus that I sometimes follow. In fact, some of you may recognize, for those of you who can see me, I'm holding up a book called Start With Why. It's by a gentleman called Simon Sinek, S-I-N-E-K. It's available as a book. It's also available as a TED Talk on YouTube. Very interesting 15 minutes worth of watching if you go onto a TED Talk. But anyway, Simon Sinek in this video last night that Rob shared with me said some interesting things, talking about the new norm. And I know it's not his phrase, but it is a phrase that's been used quite a lot. And undoubtedly, there is going to be a new norm. Life is going to change, and probably in our lifetime, we've lived through political and economic changes, recessions, and maybe some of us have lived and experienced sort of war times or post-war times. And we adapt and we change. And one thing's consistent, which is some businesses don't survive. Businesses that struggled when the internet came online, when streaming came online, they couldn't cope and change quick enough, and they went out of business. But I think what maybe is a little bit different this time is that we do have a bit more time to reflect. The government is certainly trying their best to support us, and we can certainly learn from the past. And it's all up to us and our confidence as to what we do now to gear up with our businesses and what we really believe in. And we don't just want to survive, but we want to thrive. So this is some of the things that I'm going to talk to you about over the next few minutes.
Elliot, sorry, I'll just do Christopher Atfield, would you mind muting yourself if that's okay, please, if you can hear me? Oh, Elliot, do you want to mute?
Yep. Okay. Fine, okay, so as long as everybody can still hear me, I'm now going to share my screen, and as long as I don't have any technical difficulties, you'll get the right screen. So just bear with me one moment, which I think should be this one. Okay, fine, so you should now be able to see, I can see Jenny's face, but not anybody else's. So Jenny, if you just nod that you can see the presentation. Okay, great. So obviously today, this is what we're going to be discussing. And before I really go into any main presentation, I often want to ask people, you know, what their tank is, because you know, how you're feeling is often how you cope with your business and very key decisions that you're making in your business. You know, if your tank is low, if your energies are low and you're running on empty, you're not going to make good business decisions. There are some big challenges and opportunities ahead. And one thing I would encourage all of you is, if you are feeling sluggish, maybe you need to look around you and take some time. If you can, buy yourself a little bit of time away from the business, even if it's just a change of scenery for a few hours, to talk to people outside your business. As I know, I work with Rob and Heather Copley. They gain a lot from talking to me or other business owners, and sometimes it's that clarification or bouncing ideas around that can put your energy up. So really, before you do anything, always make sure you've got a good tank. And as you know, you wouldn't have an empty tank in your cars or your tractors or any of the equipment that you use in your business, so don't let your own tank go too low. One of the elements of running a good business is to cope under any circumstance. And when you're in disaster recovery, and when you have that disaster recovery mindset, we go straight into survival mode. You know, our initial instinct is to cut costs, to protect cash. And in this case, I think a lot of us look to survive through furloughing many of our employees. We feared the worst. We looked at services or anything that we could cut back on initially before we knew what was going to happen. And all of these are sometimes the right things to do. And across the businesses that I work with and that I coach and advise, yes, some people did take very quick measures, but others maybe had a bit more confidence and waited to see what happened first. But the point of this slide really is not to be thinking about survival, but really to be thinking about planning, because we should really be now out of that survival mode, out of that disaster recovery mode, and you should all be thinking about what you need to do to run a successful business. So I'm asking you to really think about your mindset, your tank, your energy, and to think about planning, you know, planning for what you want your business to be, and not to write off the rest of this year. You know, to really believe in your business, you know, to look at what opportunities you have, and to build on what could be, you know, an even better business than it was before the lockdown. And we'll talk a little bit about some of the ideas that could bring. So let's turn our question. It sounds a bit Shakespearean, but to furlough or not to furlough. Really, you're all now familiar with the scheme that now has recently been extended to the 31st of October. In its current format, we know the scheme will continue until the end of July. That is the sort of 80% of salaries, wages up to £2,500 per month. But what we do know is, and what we'll hear more about in the next few weeks, is what does that really mean for us after August? What is going to happen after the end of July is that there will be some elements of contribution required from you, and therefore you're going to have to start thinking about what decisions you need to make as a business, because financially this will impact on you, whereas furloughing staff is obviously not costing you in the same way. That might be to encourage a halfway house to bring back some people part-time or reduced hours where you're contributing and the government contributes, or perhaps people staying at home on furlough, but you still have to contribute rather than the government paying 80%. So that's something for you to consider. If you do have any specific furlough questions, I'll do my best to answer those at the end. So again, save up those questions for later on. So one of the steps that I'd like you all to start think about at your business is out of survival mode. What does this planning mode look like? The next 6 to 8 months. Nobody has a crystal ball, but one of the things we do need to do is to think about, what events, what activities, what seasonality is coming up that you need to gear up for. And By doing that, you'll be able to very carefully think about what resource that you might need. That will obviously have an implication on the furlough schemes. But most importantly, what are you telling your customers right now? Are you telling them the dates of when you hope to open your cafe, your restaurant, or when Pick Your Own will open? You know, marketing has a very, very powerful voice right now because everybody is using a device in some way or another. So whether that's you making a home video and talking to your customers, or you're using Facebook or LinkedIn or other social media platforms, please communicate what you're doing during July, during June, during July, during August, certainly for the next couple of months. Give them an indication of what's coming up. The more visible you are, the more opportunities you're going to have to see a strong footfall. So thinking next about your team and who you need to bring back. This is an opportunity that doesn't come across very often, an opportunity for you to think about how your team have behaved during lockdown. Those who have come to work and may have had to do different jobs because the cafe isn't open, they may have worked in the farm shop or even on the farm. You know, how well have they reacted to your instructions? How cooperative have they been? And has it brought to the surface individuals who may no longer be part of that future of your business? So really, this is a time to think about your dream team. It's a time to think about who is right for the business, who's right to be on the bus with you, and whether this situation creates opportunities to either, you know, move people out of the business or bring new talent into the business in the coming months. Also, have your values change, your company values. You know, I heard Rob Copley talking the other day on Facebook on one of his videos about how he'd introduced a few new values to the business. And that's certainly something that you should all consider, is whether the positioning of your proposition, who you want to be seen as to your customers, has that changed? And has that changed as a result of the way that you're going to behave during self-isolation and during social distancing? So those are things for you to consider. But this is really, it's never been a better time for you to stop and to reflect on what you're trying to do as a business for the next 6 to 8 months, you know, to consider what could be the new norm, to look at some of the limitations that you had in your business, some of the weaknesses, and to see it as an opportunity to grow stronger. Not to panic, not to cut costs, not necessarily to bring back troublemakers or people who were underperforming, but to really look at what you want as a business going forward and potentially to restructure where necessary. So what are some of the preparations then that you need to make for the return to work? Okay, RTW, so that's return to work. Some of the expectations that you may have been communicated when you furloughed your employees in the first place. You may have stated the notice period in which you were going to instruct them to return, i.e., you know, you're furloughed indefinitely or for 3 weeks at a time, but we can bring you back within 24 hours or the next day or within 48 hours. So, you know, if in doubt, you must speak to HR. These are very sensitive, litigious, legal issues if you get it wrong. So please, you know, please consult the experts. But from a seminar that I attended this morning with some employment lawyers, they did say if you haven't specified it, 48 hours notice is still reasonable. So if you do want somebody to return to work in 2 days, unless they have a very strong and legitimate reason that they can't return to work, and that doesn't include the sun is shining and I'm quite enjoying this, then they do have to return to work. But it has to be reasonable. If they need childcare support and that isn't in place, of course, you need to consult with them and make sure that it's reasonable for them to return. For them to return to work, your responsibility is creating a safe work environment. That means carrying out a risk assessment, creating policies that you can share to give them confidence about returning to work. So, my advice to you is don't just tell people to return, walk your way through your business, create those policies. And if you have internal HR, they must be involved. This is part of the policies that need to be in writing, that you need to share, and walk through the business, looking for every opportunity to create safe environments for your employees. And of course, that will dovetail into safe environments for your customers as well. You may need to look at where they will be working, where the demands are for different parts of the business. That might mean staggering some people because you can't cope with the number of employees in one particular area. You may need to rota people. Of course, there are always considerations that maybe the business can no longer justify everybody to return. Furloughing is no longer an option, and you can, whilst people are furloughed, you can undertake redundancy processes. They must be followed as per the normal redundancy process, but you can do that whilst they're furloughed if you no longer consider their roles are going to be there. But be ready for what we all believe, and many of us believe, is going to be a spike and a demand, whether it's in a few weeks or a month or two. People will want to come back, and they will want to come back in numbers. So for those of you who are wondering whether your business will survive, if you had a good business before and people were coming to visit you, they will come back. But keep communicating what you're doing. So some of the things that you can do, and this is obviously not exhaustive, is to think about walking your way through your cafe, your offices, your shop, your meeting rooms, and making sure that every step of the way it's very clearly signed in terms of what you should do, having hand sanitizers or wipes or PPE for your employees. What do you do if they share areas, whether that's kitchens or toilets or staff rooms or meeting rooms? Everything has to be done, with safe distancing. In fact, one of the tips I gave to a client this morning, he said, well, how do I know what's safe and what is not safe? And I said, well, start from the very beginning, almost like you're doing a customer experience from the front gate, from where they park, that's employees as well as customers. Pretend your hands were covered in something, whether it's ink, paint, or chocolate, and everything you touch, that is a touch point. These touch points need to be cleaned, or need to be left open, or need to be sanitized, or need to be out of bounds. Those are the sort of risk assessments that you need to be doing. So careful considerations. Absolutely, safety is paramount, and don't be superficial. Make sure that you have what you need to create a safe environment, and that you have stock of anything that you need and you don't run out. Don't put anybody at risk. Well, one of the things that somebody was talking to me about the other day was how do you communicate that you are a safe company to return to, both for employees and for clients? Well, one way is perhaps to have a COVID secure seal, a stamp, a logo. And perhaps the FRA would consider whether there's something you could do that is for all your members to demonstrate that you're COVID secure. It could be something you put on social media, on your websites, to give people the confidence that they can return and that you've put the measures in place. So just a little thought there, to have something that, like an ISO or your hygiene rating, it gives customers and staff the confidence that they can return securely, and communicate it. And if you do that, hopefully people will return because they'll feel confident to do that. Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit now about reopening your cafe or your restaurant. And these considerations also dovetail into pick your own, which I will cover very briefly after this. But I tried to put some of these ideas down. And again, your cafe is your experience, as I've put in the middle. It needs to be safe. Your experience needs to be prompt. and efficient, but most of all, it needs to be memorable. People want to come back. If they've taken the opportunity to come and visit you after many, many weeks of lockdown, make sure that it's memorable, make sure they have a great time, make sure they tell all their friends and family that your shop, your cafe is a place to go. So some of the things, and I'll run through this fairly quickly. Risk assessments, obviously we've covered that. What can you be doing to make sure, you know, your cafe, your restaurant is safe, and do that audit. What numbers, what capacity is safe? If you had a cafe that had 100 people, maybe you can only allow 50 people in it now. You know, what are those numbers that you're going to limit? What's the layout going to be? Will that layout affect the experience? If you have a very large area, do you need to section off and actually just direct people into a smaller area? Part of the experience, make it memorable. Nobody wants to come and have lunch in a big cafe where there's only a quarter or a half of the normal people. You know, acoustics play a role in that as well. Signage everywhere. Signage on the doors. Please don't enter if you have symptoms. Signage and floor markings about keeping 2 or more meters apart. Policies on children. I mean, you know, cafes and restaurants are places where there are lots of children. What's your policy going to be? You know, if I want to have a pleasant afternoon tea or lunch and there are children running around me, maybe I won't be too pleased to return again. So lots of hand sanitizers, considerations for your toilets and your baby changing. What's your service, your policy on taking orders, on taking cash, on cardless only, on till use, on lining up and queuing to make orders or to pay, whilst people are trying to walk past the till if it's near the door. Smoking area, vaping. Okay, so I'm running through these fairly quickly, but I'm trying to give you ideas of things that you need to consider, and you may have many, many more as well. You may have space outside that you can create safe eating experiences outside the cafe or restaurant and section those off. Whatever you do, be considerate, make sure it's clear, be creative and make it a great experience. And you know, there are lots of businesses now opening their doors, and the people that will get return and repeat business are the ones that make it safe, prompt and memorable. Just in the last week, the golf courses all opened, or many of them did, or most of them did, and I played golf on Sunday, and the experience was excellent. I have never seen the golf course so busy. You know, I'm used to seeing a few cars in the car park, and it was absolutely full. There were people who had never played golf before because they want to go out and socialize and interact. And your business is exactly the same. If you make it an experience for them to return, and you're on their radar and you show them that it's a great place to come, they will come back in their droves. So how does this relate to Pick Your Own? Again, tell them what you're going to be doing. We know that Pick Your Own is probably going to be after July, all being well. Again, use social media, use your marketing, use your videos, use your website, tell them what's coming up. But most importantly, people will only come if they believe it's controlled. And how do you control that? Like the supermarkets, when you have to queue up outside, you need to maybe ticket the event or control numbers on the door. You need to have one-way systems, but clearly marked. You don't want people walking backwards and forwards. You don't want children running up and down and jumping over from one to the other. Clearly sign what you're doing. The clearer the sign, the more people will come and they will enjoy the experience. You know, make sure there's plenty of opportunities to stay safe and to sanitize with washing areas, with hand gels, and, you know, give them options. Maybe some people will not feel comfortable to come and to pick, but maybe they want to come and collect. So make that as an option where they can pre-order punnets, whatever it is that you're growing. You know, you don't want to end up with fruit rotting because people didn't turn up in numbers. So be creative. Again, just as you're opening your shop, your cafe, your restaurant, make it part of the experience, make it fun, make it safe, make it enjoyable. So I'm just going to quickly run through a few other slides about integrating your team as well, because of course integrating your team is very much about, you know, people who have been furloughed, people who perhaps have not been back to the office, to the shop, to the cafe, to the restaurant in 6, 8 or 10 weeks. So you may need to re-establish who your leaders are, and your leaders may have changed. You may decide to have a restructure, and you need to share what your expectations are. You know, imagine how people are after a holiday for a week or two. Now imagine how they are after 8 weeks. So set out your position, encourage people to meet in smaller groups, re-establish those dynamics and those authority lines. Here's your opportunity to reposition what you're trying to do as a business. As leaders, as business owners, re-establish what it is that you want to tell them and how you want things doing. Set yourself new standards, but don't expect too much too quickly, because you need to be patient. Just as people come off a holiday, it's a little bit of a honeymoon period. There will be people who will struggle, maybe they've been doing a different job. Maybe they've been working in the shop. They've been working in the shop and now they're back in the cafe. They were picking and packing and sweeping and clearing, and all of a sudden they're serving in a different way. So just be a little bit patient. And of course, there will be individuals who may have not enjoyed the experience of being furloughed. Their home life, young children, small homes, not enough places to walk and to get fresh air. They may be struggling and they may need a little bit of time to adjust. So, you know, be sensitive, make sure your management, your leadership and HR will obviously support that in being compassionate. But whatever you do, just make sure there's lots and lots of regular communication, because, you know, we're trying to rebuild a team here and rebond a team. And it may even be that at the appropriate time, you need to celebrate your return to work. You need to remind everyone and thank everyone for their patience and their cooperation. So don't forget the importance of team building. And again, just reiterating there, people may need some additional support, and don't overlook that we're not all the same and we don't all respond in the same way. So just turning our attention to marketing and, you know, what lies ahead, and maybe for you to think about this period as, you know, not the norm. And it certainly hasn't been the norm. Some of you have experienced good levels of trading and some of you have not. Some of you have benefited from transforming and pivoting your business online and having, you know, online sales where before you never did anything in that way. But don't forget what business was like before, and maybe some of the reasons you weren't doing as well before. Maybe it's time to think differently. You know, whilst nobody is in a rush to take out a business interruption loan, the government is encouraging you to invest in your business, to make sure that you've got good, strong cash flow, to make sure that you can support the growth of your business. And perhaps an interruption loan could be used at 0% interest for the next 12 months to grow your business, invest in e-commerce, invest in your website, get some professional marketing, maybe even bring in, you know, new talent to the business, experience that you didn't have before. So the point here is, you know, people who invest will do very well. Those who wait to see how things go may actually start to struggle. You know, we can't just sit and wait for things to happen. We have to go out there and do it. And you know, for somebody who's worked very closely with Robert and Heather Copley at Pharmacopolis for the last 4 years, I've watched of how they've looked forward, they've invested, they've looked at opportunities, and they've never waited for businesses to do well before they take the next step. They invest and they see the benefit of that investment. And that's what I'd encourage anybody who is waiting for business just to boom. It doesn't just boom, you have to do something about it. So look at marketing as a key driver for your brand, you know, that drives traffic, that drives your profile, that drives your message, and don't wait for business to pick up. So communicate what you're doing at all times, communicate what's coming up, tell them what went well, share it, promote it, you know, and give people the confidence to come back to your farm shop, to your farm experience, rather than going down the road or spending their money elsewhere. Okay, so we're almost there, and I just, sorry, just a point really again on e-commerce. It doesn't have to be expensive, and I think if you speak to Heather Copley in particular, she's invested recently to update their website, their online presence, and they're seeing the benefits. It doesn't need to be expensive. It doesn't need to be an area where you believe your business can't gear up for some change and pivot for the future. So a couple of summary points. Make sure you have a clear plan. Okay, think ahead, look ahead, prioritize. Don't panic anymore. Don't try and deal with survival. Deal to thrive. Deal for future progression. Bring back essential employees, but be thinking about what you want as a dream team. You know, what does your business look like? Not just how quickly do I bring everybody back and carry on as I did do in March or February or January. What an opportunity we have to do things differently. Make sure that all those risk assessments are recorded and well communicated. You know, make your business safe and memorable. And most importantly, be patient, you know, in what we're doing over the next 4 to 8 weeks. Be careful, be mindful, and be compassionate. And, you know, whether it's your business or all the other businesses that I'm working with, for those who aren't investing right now, I think they're missing a big opportunity. You know, this is a time to invest, to thrive, to look at how you can prosper. And if you ask anybody who are the most successful business people, they probably sought most of their business success during times of recession, where the competition sat still, did very little, they capitalized, they invested, they looked ahead, and they planned for the future rather than panicked and cut costs. So the important message is build for the future, and that's really what I want to leave you with. So I think we're at a perfect point that I can unmute you and ask if you have any questions. Happy to take those. So let me stop sharing this screen, and you should all be back. And if I can just find all the participants, I'll leave you muted, to be honest. And if you would like to ask a question, either put a Q in the chat box or put your hand up for Jenny to see, and unmute yourself. And if you can't unmute yourself, just wave your hand and I'll unmute you. So, okay, thanks very much. Okay, Jenny, you keep yourself up. Yes,
yeah,
you keep yourself unmuted.
Okay, okay.
I could see a few hands. I saw Rosemary waving and I saw Andrew waving. So Rosemary, if you want to unmute.
Just like to say I haven't been to something like this before, and I'd like to say thank you very much for your presentation. So that was like an applause.
Okay, thank you. Oh, you can have little emojis at the bottom actually. If you
oh yes, on the
you could have a little wavy hand
reactions.
Even on the reactions.
Yeah.
Okay. So Jenny's going to help me look for anybody who's waving or putting questions. Andrew Burton, yes.
Am I coming through? It's only a quickie. Elliot, thanks very much. That was great. It was just based on the marketing side of telling people about COVID. If you go on to the EHO website, they've got a sign that actually tells people that you're COVID compliant. They've suggested it from the government, so it might be something to spread round. Jenny, I think I sent you some. It's on the very top picture.
Yeah,
but it's something that's gone down really well in some businesses, and customers reacted well. So it was just to add to that.
Thanks, Andrew.
That's a really good idea. I think anything that sends a positive message, just as hygiene ratings or you know, sort of stars and ratings and satisfactions and ISOs. You know, what is the stamp of approval for having a business that is safe to visit? Whatever you can do, market that and promote it. I can only see so many people on screen, so maybe there are a number of non-video participants. So if you are a non-video participant and you want to put a Q in the chat box, happy to answer any of your questions.
Yeah, there are no hands going up at the moment and no Qs in the chat box just yet. And I was going to mention, Elliot, while people perhaps have a ponder, we're joined on the call by Owen from Merlinsoft. Give us a wave, Owen. There you are. And Owen kindly shared some information following on from what you'd mentioned about people ordering from their seats and things like that potentially. So I'll share that with the group tomorrow. But I'm not sure if you've ever been to a Wetherspoons and you sit at your table, and I'm sure none of you are Wetherspoons clientele, but sit at the table and just order from where you are. Owen's got some functionality that enables that, and also when you go to like food halls, and you can have the pager that buzzes when it's ready for you to go collect your food, so that might help with stopping people moving around your cafe and restaurant. Yeah,
so I think Robert's waving there. Rob Copley.
So I've been chatting to a couple of farm shops recently with cafes, and they were both under the opinion that when they open the cafes, nobody's going to come. They said it's mainly old people and they're just going to stay away. Whereas I think that when we open as cafe, there's going to be a queue around the building to get in because people are going to want to come. What's your thoughts on it, Elliot?
I think this is about belief. You know, the number one thing you have to have is belief. And for everything that's opened, there are queues around the block. The minute Homebase and B&Q opened, there were queues around the block. The minute the golf courses were open, there were queues around the block. The minute that my high street were given any indication they could open, there were queues down the road for picking up pastries or picking up a takeaway or the fish and chips. People will come back, and I am very confident they're going to come back in numbers. In fact, I think people will be disappointed they have to queue to come back. Anybody who believes that people are going to stay at home are kidding themselves. You're about to see a spike, and if you're not ready, they'll go somewhere else. Quite honestly, the minute that Boris and his team gave people an inch to socialise and to interact a little bit more over the last week or so, people have been taking every advantage to drive that bit further. There's traffic on the road. There's more people out and about. There's people pushing boundaries, and people will want to come and interact. They haven't got the confidence to go on holiday. If the airlines open up and say, come use the airlines, people won't do it. People just won't do it at the minute. But the minute people say you can go to a restaurant, a cafe, a shop, and it will be socially safe to do so, people will go back and do it. We all want to spend a little bit of money. Maybe not thousands and thousands, but we all we're addicted to spending a little bit of money and enjoying ourselves. So to answer your question, Rob, get ready for the spike because it's coming, and it's coming very, very quickly. So gear up for it before everybody else overtakes.
I can see Joanna's iPad.
I can see a gentleman disguised.
Somebody you don't know. Yeah. My name's Rupert Burrow. We have a visitor centre on our farm. We're very much a working farm. We're just outside Swindon. Totally closed all through lambing and everything else, of course, and lost 40% of our annual income. But today, as by chance, we opened our farm up for people to go for walks around the farm. We have a fairly sensible system of routes around our farm that we take tractor rides on normally and things like that. No idea what was happening, but we put it on Facebook yesterday lunchtime. By tea time, I gather, I'm not involved with all of this stuff, but my daughter tells me that it had been seen by 20,000 people. By breakfast time this morning, been seen by 100,000 people. We've had something just over 200 cars in the car park today. And we've just asked for a couple of quid in an honesty box, and that's how we've counted the cars. It has been remarkable. I have seen hundreds, literally, of very happy faces today. So I just want to back up what you said. People want to come. We've had people who have travelled 30 miles from Oxford, never been to us before, just picked it up off Facebook. It has been a quite remarkable experience, to be honest, after weeks of gloom. And it gives us a little bit of confidence to sort of push things forward. And in our situation, we have a lot of indoor space. And I think that the thing with cafes and getting cafes and things opening again, we're all different. And I hope there's going to be an element of, not leniency, but opportunity for those who've got more space to be able to do something. We could house many hundreds of people in our buildings at 2 metre spacings. So, I don't know whether that comes in the negotiations with government and everything else, or the promotion, but some places are obviously larger than others, and some could, greater opportunity. But anyway, for what it's worth, we've had a very happy experience today. Yes, and we opened our cafe for takeaways. So people just came into the counter in order to buy the menus on the wall outside. It's gone extremely well. We've had some picnic benches dotted around there and by the car park and everything. And I'm told we took about 900 quid through there. So, not to be sniffed at all. And that's purely on doing things that we set to start about. It took us about 5 days to set it all up.
The planning does.
For what it's worth.
Well, thank you. And the planning does need to start now. I very much will encourage you to get out of your mode of panic, of cost cutting, of holding back and trying to deal with a disaster recovery mode. You need to plan, and the business will come. Every time I look at pharmacopolies, and I'm sorry if I keep using them as an example, but I do work closely with them. Every week there's another example of another initiative. Takeaway pizzas. The day they opened takeaway pizzas, Rob told me they sold hundreds. So everything you do, people will want. They want something new. They want to come and have a coffee, even if it means they can just grab a takeaway coffee and walk around. So, don't underestimate that, people want to spend. Even being furloughed, most people, not most, maybe I shouldn't say most, a lot of people financially are slightly better off because they're not spending. Their cost of living has changed. Maybe they're getting holidays for mortgages and rents. They're not going out and doing what they normally do. So going to your businesses and spending a few pounds on a lunch, an afternoon tea, a coffee, or whatever produce and experience you're doing is an absolute treat. And if they can't do it, they'll go somewhere else and spend the money. And furthermore, people are now going to spend their money more and more on their homes and their leisure, things that they can safely do. So if you do anything that is home related, whether you can do afternoon teas for them, or you sell garden furniture, or you sell potted plants, or you're gearing up for festivals and whatever's coming forward, people will spend money on their houses, their homes, their pastimes and their leisure. So if you have shops or food, gear up for it, because everybody wants to do things in a safe environment.
Yeah, I think I'd sort of back that up, and people aren't going to be able to go on holiday in the same way. So there's some fairly big bucks out there to be taken.
I have a client who sells picture frames online, and he said in the last 3 months his business is turning over what it does at Christmas. So in other words, everyone's at home and they all want to buy framed pictures because they're looking around their houses and what can I do? Well, I need to get some of the stuff up on the wall, and I've got a bit more money than usual, so I'll do it nicely. I mean, he's experiencing 100 to 150% month on month increase based on last year. And all he's done is invest in his online business. He's done nothing else.
Now we've got Owen from Merlin.
Just picking up on the comment about holidays, back in 2009, after the crash of the banks, we saw a rise in staycations of 13.4%. We're going to be seeing figures way, way above that when people start coming out again, because you're quite right. They won't want to be on planes. They won't want to be herded together. They will want to feel safe. And if we've got the safe signs up and we've got all the procedures in place and people get a good experience, they will flock to us. They'll come out in droves.
Yes, I agree. I think anybody who has any experiences that involved holiday homes or people who are holidaying in the UK, these are the people who will come and visit you. So if you're in locations that are, you know, that open it and lend itself to people visiting because you're in a rural location, you could have a lot more visitors than normal because people will be out looking for things to do at weekends. I mean, I live in Leeds, you know, and, you know, I can drive pretty much anywhere as you can, you know, to get away for the weekend, to have a day trip. And that's what I look to do with my family. Where can I go? Where's safe to go? How can we spend the day? And hopefully when hotels and other things open up again, we can have a night away, a weekend break, and that's where we'll spend our money.
Oh, is it Rupert?
Yeah, sorry, yeah, pitch in again if I might, because one of the things that we're looking forward to doing is camping.
Yes.
For those of us who have farms, you know, and have space, I mean, space is what people want, and you know, I would encourage anybody to consider doing some form of or let people. We started camping because somebody came to one of our regular visitors, came to us one day 3 or 4 years ago, and said, could they try camping in the corner of a field because their little 2-year-old, they wanted to find out if they would live under canvas or not for the first time, close to home, where they could bolt for home if it didn't work out. And that's how our we have now organised, or for this year we had organised 3 camping weekends, 4 camping weekends, which we do a bit of entertaining. They have our visitor centre to visit, but we do give them a meal, a barbecue meal. We have barbecue for all of them on the Saturday evening, and they get a few little frills and things like that. And we took their money, I'm afraid, way back in January. We were sold out within 10 days. In fact, the first day sold out within a day of putting it on in January for June and July. And camping, I think, is just an opportunity. It's a huge opportunity.
Huge opportunity. Everything needs to be done with social distancing in mind. So you talk about camping, if you're offering any facilities, again, make sure it's safe. If there are communal areas, that it's safe. So whatever you do, walk yourself through the whole customer journey and the customer experience. Just you know, just as you're doing, if you're doing any sort of online services, any click and collect, walk it through yourself and just think about how your customer would feel, or how your member of staff, your employee would feel serving that customer or being on both ends. And make sure that you're covered, that you've done an audit and you've got measures in place, because people will keep coming back if they think it's great. And this is going to go on for some time, unfortunately. This is not a 6 or 8 or 3 month process. You know, we'll be doing this until next year. There are no vaccines available. There will be a lot of vulnerable people, a lot of nervous people, and we have to adapt for what will be this new norm. Just as we adapted when the internet came in, just as people adapted after the war. You know, there will be changes and it will become part of our new lifestyle. So I can't see any queues. We've got a few minutes left. Oh, I do see a queue. From Diane, do you not think Pick Your Own can open before 4th of July? I think Pick Your Own may be classed as the next phase of everything else. As I understand it, June is non-essential retail. Beyond that, but I can see what Rob waving, so perhaps I should refer to the expert.
Yeah, I just thought I'd come in on this. We had a PYO discussion through the FRA with about 30 people on, and the general consensus is the right time to open PYOs is when the playgrounds and National Trust properties open, when people are allowed to visit places like that. PYO with social distancing probably would be acceptable. There is no legislation on it, so we've got to feel his way through it. But
right,
when the playgrounds and the National Trust properties open, that's probably the best guide.
Okay. I'll listen to the experts on that one. But again, you know, you need to gear up for making it a fantastic, safe experience for both your employees manning it, your marketing to promote it, and controlling movement, traffic, signage, and taking payment. So if you can do that in the next 10 days or so, good luck, but I suspect that will take you a little bit longer. And also, I guess the strawberries aren't ready yet. But then again, I'm not a farmer, so I don't know.
Technically, they're open now. It is classed as essential,
right.
food, but there is no legislation about
Okay.
it. So you've just got to be really, really careful.
Okay.
Andrew, were you giving us a wave or?
Yeah, it was only just to add weight to what Rob was saying. I've been in touch with the EHO, and each EHO in your local area might have a slightly different opinion of what is right or what is wrong. So I'd encourage any business to talk to their local EHO, and if they want to pick your own, make sure the risk assessment's in place, make sure the EHO are happy, and then they'll give you guidance whether or not they're okay with it. But it will work differently depending where you live, unfortunately.
Just to follow up on Andrew's point there as well, Andrew joins us from Malcolm Scott Consulting and has kindly offered to pull some kind of overarching bullet points together for us when it comes to risk assessment. So if any of you are unsure as to what different measures you should be putting in place for your risk assessments, we'll be sharing that over the next week or so. So just keep an eye out for that.
Super. So any specific questions on furloughing, or anybody nervous about the selection process, when to bring people back, or what to do if perhaps you decide not to bring those individuals back, or you're all quite comfortable, or you're not there yet and you're thinking? Don't know if anybody's got any comments on that. No, can't see anybody in the chat box. Owen?
Yeah, just picking up, we had a discussion about this on Friday night last week with NAFAN, and there's some lobbying going on at the moment to try and change the rules on lockdown, because at the moment we know it's 3 weeks off, 1 week on, whereas in some cases people need to come back for a day or two, but they can't justify a week. So what they're hoping is that there'll be some flexibility on lockdown as we come further into the season, to allow people to come back as the needs allow. It's going to make it a bit more difficult putting your furlough claims in, I accept, when you're going to be making changes for 1 or 2 days rather than a week. But I think this sector needs that flexibility, and there's a lot of work going on behind the scenes at the moment to try and make that happen.
Okay. I suspect what we'll hear from the government by the end of May is how that looks for the new rules that'll come into effect in August. And I think they'll try and encourage a level of flexibility to encourage you to bring people off furlough with a level of contribution, because it's either all or nothing at the minute. Either they're furloughed or you're paying them their salary. And what we're trying to encourage is we want people back to work, but some levels of trading make it difficult to afford people back in their old roles. So I think that's part of the government trying to encourage you with a combination of employee contribution and perhaps even taking out business interruption loans to look forward at how you can rebuild and sort of diversify your business for a stronger future. And I think that's absolutely key, that the opportunities are there. And the danger is you just try and return to the business that you had earlier this year. If you do that, you're either risking the growth or you're missing a big opportunity.
Thank you very much, Elliot.
Okay.
I'm not sure if we've got any more questions, but I'll share your contact details with everybody tomorrow in a follow-up along with the recording, so people can watch back or share with any colleagues that think might benefit from watching the session. But thank you so much for hosting for us. All right, I hope that was useful. And like I said at the beginning, if nothing else, if there was no new material, if it was a clarification of what you're doing already, then that's a great sign that you're on the right tracks. And if you do have anything specific, more than happy to offer you some time. Give me a call, drop me an email, and I'll do my best to support you. All the best and good luck to you all out there, and thanks for supporting your communities. Well done. Thank you. Okay, thank you. Bye now.